Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel where we create photorealistic assets together. So in today's video, I want to show you a quick little practice I did using one of my old models. I'm still not super familiar with the skin painting process inside a substance painter, so I figured a little practice wouldn't hurt. And I recorded the process, figured this can help you guys as well. Let's get into it. First, I want to quickly show you what the model looks like. It's an old sculpt I did based on Stick from Daredevil. That's why he's blind. It was a very fun model to do, and in general, I feel like guys are easier to sculpt than girls. They just have more pronounced landmarks on their face and easier to capture the structure for sure. First thing we do in Substance is, of course, to bake the sculpt into our base model. I always just leave everything at default. In general, it works pretty well for me. Here's the finished bake. Everything looks pretty good. One thing I like to do is to assign the curvature map quickly to the model just to check if I got all the detail I need from the bake. That also looks pretty good, so I think we can move on. The next thing I will do is to give it a basic decent roughness before I start adding color. So I will create an entire folder just for roughness, and everything inside the folder only affects roughness. The first layer I create is the matte layer, which the roughness is going to be at 0. The second layer I will create is a layer that I will assign the curvature mask to it, and give it a generic value like 0.5 or whatever you like. By the way, I do turn on the color value on my base matte layer and set it to black. It's a great way to see your spec. But it's just for display purposes. I will never turn it on when I'm actually texturing. I'm starting to set up my next layer, which I will set a curvature map to it. If I turn on the black layer, you will be able to see how the curvature map is breaking up the spec. And that's the effect we want. We want the skin pore to be more rough than what's on top of it. Now I can adjust the roughness of this layer on its own to determine how intense the spec should be for the entire face. I'm starting to collect some texture I will be using. The last character I textured, I was starting with flat color for all of the colors. But for this guy, I want the texture to have a little bit more realism to it. So I actually prepared some tileable generic skin texture to start. I create a new folder and name it color. So all my color information is going to be inside of this folder. I found it's much easier to separate different elements like that for a character. The first layer of the skin I will do is the base generic color. I created a new fill layer and only allow it to affect color. And then I dragged my tileable map into the color slot. I changed the setting to triplanar and adjust the tiling a little bit until I'm happy. I will also instance this fill layer across all Udin tiles. In this case, it's just one more Udin tile for the face. Now we have our base color we can paint everything on. The next color I will make is this red color that you can often see inside the wrinkles, in skin pores. It kind of shows a lot of skin quality. It's a kind of a very generic and broad feature all over the face. And we are going to use our curvature map again to create this feature. I create a new fill layer and I'm gonna drag another skin tileable that I prepared that's more reddish into this fill layer. I will go through the same process of adjusting it until I'm happy with the tiling and everything. Then I will right click on the fill layer and select Add Bitmap Mask and select the curvature map. Right now, everything is inverted. I want the red to be in the cavity, not outside. I will assign an invert filter on top. Right now, the curvature mask is a little too all over the place, so I add another paint layer on top to reduce certain area. I'm using one of the actor's picture as a reference to see which area is a little bit more red, so I will keep the curvature map, and certain area you don't see the red as much, and I will reduce it with the brush. It's pretty tricky to use actor photos you find on the internet because depends on the photographer and the situation and the time the photo is being photographed. the face can look completely different. So sometimes I just pick and choose the photo I think it's interesting. I duplicated this fill layer to my next UDIM tile for the face. Because we have to paint on this, we cannot instance it. I heard a real UDIM function is coming for substance. I really hope that happens soon because this is a bit pain in the ass. I found that the forehead area is a lot more yellowish than reddish, so I need to reduce this curvature mask a lot on top of the forehead. Once I'm happy with this overall red skin detail, the next color I will create is another red layer, but this one is just for the redness, general redness on the face. The setup is exactly the same. Once I'm happy, I assign a black mask to this fill layer, and I'm going to use a very spotty brush to brush in this red color. Unlike last time where I used a procedural mask to break up my paint, this time I'm going to test out different texture brushes. I haven't used a lot of them for skin inside a painter, so I thought that would be a good practice and for me to see which texture brush I enjoy using for this kind of purpose. Here, I mostly use two brushes. One is the dirt spots for softer breakup, and one is the dots brush for more broken up look. I also like to zoom out looking at the model from far away to paint some of the color breakup. Sometimes we zoom in too much and don't see the big picture. The next color I will add is the yellow color. You can probably tell at this point that the basic face color is in general the same. We need a base color and we always have a reddish layer and then we always have a yellow layer. The red in general is for the more flashy area of the face and the yellow in general is for the area that's a little bit more closer to the bone. Depends on the specific character you're working on. Once we set up these basic concepts, you can start to deviate and add things that are very different from character to character. After I'm happy with the yellow distribution, the next color is the bluish tone. We always see this purple tone like underneath the eye in the corner or next to the nose, and this is what this layer is for. I'm going to brush in some light blue tone and mix with the red, and everything will start look a little bit purple in certain area. So far, I only worked on very generic colors that you basically see on everybody. And I think now once I have all these elements together, it's time to adjust their colors and actually have a direction for my character. I fell into a little bit of a rabbit hole of non-stop adjusting my different colors. And finally, I decided on to make this character a little bit grotesque looking. That's why you see the base color become a lot more desaturated. I found working on the generic color is a little bit boring. And since I already done another character that has a normal looking skin, so I decided to have a little fun with this character and make him a little gross. This new reference is my main reference now. I'm aiming towards that kind of skin quality. There's going to be a lot more greenish tone on his face and it's a lot more desaturated. I will also have more purple area and a certain purple area will become a lot darker and mixed with the red tone. To make my character closer to the reference, I definitely need another green layer for the face. For this new layer, I'm just going to use a flat color and it's just for easy adjustments to what kind of green I will need because at this moment, I'm not quite sure. I'm just going to start to brush in the green and adjust it as I go until I think it starts to look more like the reference. For this kind of greenish color, it's very likely that it will be distributed towards the area that's super close to the bone. So those are the areas that I'm focusing on. It's time to add some more interesting characteristics to this character. So I got some vein mask from the internet. You just need to convert it into JPEG and import it into Substance as an alpha. And I chose this alpha for my brush and just try to brush in some interesting vein texture. Originally, I was brushing in this vein texture inside of my reddish layer and inside of my bluish layer, but later on I decided to separate this kind of paint completely into its own layer. The reason for that is in that way I can actually assign a blurred filter to this mask. Just with the alpha on its own, the vein is a little too sharp. And if you look at the vein on a person, it's always quite blurry on the edge. So I would need to be able to use a blur filter. That's the reason why I separated it out into its own layer. I'm adding even more darker detail underneath the eye because I feel like he can look even more grim. I actually found this drawing that's a great reference for some interesting color I can put on the face, even though it's not real, but I'm trying to create a fantasy character here as well, so sometimes copying the real thing gets pretty boring once you've done it enough times. It's just more fun to go with your own artistic instincts and make something interesting. Time to add even more grotesque feature on his face. This time I'm gonna use a freckle shader that I downloaded from Substance Source to create some imperfection on the face. I explained how to use this Substance Source material in my last character tutorial, so if you haven't seen that one yet, I will link it above and you can check that out. This Substance Source material is a very convenient way to just add imperfection without having to do specific projection. You might notice at this point that I don't really do projection inside of Substance Painter. Painter is very strong in procedural methods, so that's the kind of method I'm trying to use with Painter. Once I'm happy with the color and the distribution of these marks on the face, I'm gonna paint out the area that I don't want them to be in. I will also probably reduce the opacity of this entire layer. They are a little bit too strong for the kind of effects I want them to have. We need to work on the eye now for us to really see the character coming together. Again, I'm using an eye shader that I downloaded from Substance Source. It's just super easy. I scale them, I move it around until it's at the right spot. Of course, this is not physically correct. We're faking the look of the eye with the two-dimensional texture. For me, as long as it looks good by the end, I know a lot of people are not going to be very happy with me by not using something that's physically correct. More technical people is going to be very mad at me for saying this, and it probably make me sound super dumb. But for me, as long as the end result looks good, I'm happy. My goal is to give him blind eyes, so I actually create another fill layer on top with this light blue color, completely flat color, and I'm just gonna brush in on top of the eye texture I already have and try to create that foggy blue blind eye look. I adjusted the color of the eye and that blue layer a little bit until I'm happy. And now I see that the speck on the eye is a little too perfect. And in real life, it definitely has way more imperfection. I create a new fill layer and only allow it to affect normal, brought in some random normal map that I think it's gonna work, and start to break up the height of that surface and break up the speck. And now I think it looks a lot closer to the reference. Another area that I'm not too happy with this character is I realized there's a lot of very soft surface on his face. I projected this face 2-3 years ago, so it definitely has a lot of problems. How I resolve this issue is to use the shader I got from Substance Source again. They actually have a lot of different skin area displacement shader. So I assign one of the shaders to the fill layer and assign a black mask to it and brush in some areas that it's a little too soft and needs a lot more detail. The last thing I did with this character is try to add even more skin imperfection. The reference I was following, they all look quite a bit more grotesque than my character, so I'm trying to add more discoloration on the face, a lot more spots, maybe some freckles, and maybe some moles. I also use this same freckle shader to add a lot of blotchy spots on his forehead as well, and I think that really helped with the look. One thing I completely forgot to show you guys is the scattering map. For my last character, somebody was really questioning if I used any scattering on my character. So I used scattering on all the characters, and I will show you what this one looks like. Again, I keep all the scattering information inside of its own folder for easy organization. If I go to look at the scattering on its own, and this is what it looks like. I have 3 main elements inside of my scattering folder. The first one is a fill layer with no scattering at all. And the second layer is layer with full scattering, but with a curvature mask assigned to it. So instead of any kind of cavity and skin pore, there will be a little bit less scattering. And the last one is an inverted thickness map that I layer on top. That is it. That's everything I did with this character. I hope this is a helpful tutorial for you. If you enjoyed today's content, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. It really helps with the YouTube algorithm and let the video to be seen by more people. If you have any question about what I did today, please leave a comment down below. I normally reply everyone. And that's it for today. I will see you in the next one.